Chapter 2. The city was a concrete maze designed to punish. I dragged myself through the residential grid. Towering, gray, 9-floor blocks loomed over the streets. They boxed in the courtyards, cutting off the wind but trapping the damp, cold air right at the pavement level. In my old life, crossing the city was just a thought. A step through a corridor and I was there. Now, every single block felt like a marathon. My bare feet slapped against the wet asphalt. I was leaving thin, pathetic smears of blood across the stone. I passed a glowing bus stop. A stray cat darted out from under a parked car, vanishing into a trash-filled alley. For a sickening moment, I envied it. The cat had fur. The cat knew how to survive in the dirt. I didn't. My red velvet dress was a ruined, heavy rag slapping against my calves. I shivered so violently that my teeth clicked together. Several times, I had to stop and lean against the peeling paint of a building just to convince my lungs to keep working. I was suffocating inside this fragile, biological shell. Finally, I reached her building. It was a bleak monolith with a rusty metal door. I pulled it open. The smell inside hit me instantly. Sour cabbage, cheap cleaning chemicals, and old dust. I stared at the stairs. The elevator had a faded out of order sign taped across its metal doors. Of course, Earth loved to kick you when you were already down. 9 flights of chipped concrete steps. I gripped the wooden railing. I ignored the splinters biting into my frozen palms. Every time I hauled my weight up to the next step, my vision grayed out. My heart, a pathetic human pump, hammered against my ribs. By the 6th floor, I was crawling. By the 8th, I couldn't feel my legs anymore. I reached the top floor. I stopped in front of a cheap, peeling wooden door. A dull yellow light flickered in the hallway overhead. It buzzed like a dying insect. I leaned my forehead against the cold wood, just trying to remember how to breathe. I raised my fist. I wanted to knock with authority. I wanted the sound to break through the cheap material. Instead, my knuckles hit the door with a weak, desperate thud. I waited. The silence of the concrete building pressed on me. Then, footsteps inside, muffled, hesitant. The lock clicked. The door opened a few centimeters, held back by a brass chain. A girl stared at me. Estrella. She looked older than the starry-eyed girl I remembered. A year and a half had passed in this world. It carved away her naive innocence. She had dark circles under her eyes. Her phone was clutched tightly in her hand. The screen glowed in the dark, illuminating her tense, exhausted face. She looked at me. Really looked. Her eyes darted from my soaking wet hair down to the ruined mud-covered velvet of my dress and finally up to my pale, shivering face. I saw the exact moment the puzzle pieces clicked in her head. She didn't just see the fragile, glowing blonde named Luna, who had thrown a star at her in the dark. She saw the girl from the cliff, the one with the red eyes and the red dress, who watched her say goodbye. You, Asti breathed. The brass chain rattled as her hand shook. Martha? Hearing my real name in her mouth sparked a pathetic surge of pride. I tried to square my shoulders. I tried to summon the ghost of the predator I used to be. Let me in, I said. I wanted it to be a command. It came out as a wet, ragged wheeze. Asti didn't unhook the chain right away. She just stared. Her mouth was slightly open. What are you? How are you here? What happened to you? I was in the neighborhood, I rasped. My teeth clattered so hard I bit my own tongue. I tasted iron. Open the door. You look like you're dying, she whispered. She stepped back a fraction. She wasn't bowing, she wasn't terrified. She looked at me with pure, unfiltered human pity. That pity burned worse than the cold. I don't die, I spat. I leaned heavily against the doorframe just to stay upright. I am just temporarily inconvenienced. Open the damn door, Estrella. She looked at her glowing phone, then back at me. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the memories of magic and stars fighting against the reality of a bleeding girl on her welcome mat. Finally, she reached up and unhooked the chain. The door opened fully. The warm, dry air of the apartment washed over me. It smelled of cheap tea, heated dust, and ordinary life. It was the most intoxicating thing I've ever experienced. I don't understand, Asti said. Her voice trembled. Last time I saw you, you were untouchable. I am still untouchable, I lied. I forced my legs to move forward. I tried to stride past her and claim the space. My bare, bloody foot hit the edge of her cheap welcome mat. My knee buckled. The last tiny reserve of adrenaline just evaporated. The strings holding me up were cut. The room violently tilted. I saw the cheap linoleum floor rushing up to meet me. Hey! Asti dropped her phone. It hit the floor with a sharp plastic clatter. She lunged forward, grabbing my shoulders. But I was a dead weight. We collapsed together in the narrow hallway. My cheek hit the floor. It was hard and it smelled like old shoes, but it wasn't the freezing mud of the street. I stayed there, my face pressed against the linoleum. I couldn't move. My breathing was loud and jagged in the quiet apartment. Get up, Asti said. Her hands were still on my shoulders, pulling weakly. You're bleeding on the floor. I can't, I whispered. It was the most humiliating admission of my life. She let go of me and stood up. I heard her walk away. For a second, a spike of real terror hit me. Was she calling the police? Running away? But then she came back. A rough, dry towel was dropped onto the back of my head. Roll over, she said. I managed to push myself onto my back. The ceiling light blinded me. Asti knelt beside me, pressing the towel against my scraped, muddy cheek. She didn't look like someone facing a magical being. She looked like someone cleaning up a mess she didn't ask for. You're human, she said, staring at the bright red blood on the towel. Your blood, it's normal. An observation worthy of an academy, I muttered, coughing. The cuff tore through my chest like shards of glass. When you were Luna, you glowed, she said. Her voice was quiet but sharp. When you were on the cliff, you were terrifying. Now you're just freezing to death. The star I threw at you, I gasped, fighting another cough. I take it, it didn't fix everything. Astrid stopped, wiping my face. Her eyes darkened, pulling away into whatever miserable reality she was currently living in. The shadows under her eyes looked heavier up close. It fixed some things, she said flatly, but magic doesn't pay the rent, and it doesn't stop people from being awful. She tossed the bloody towel aside and grabbed me under my arms. Come on, you can't stay on the floor. My parents aren't home, but if they walk in and see a bleeding girl in a velvet dress, they'll call the cops. I told you, I wheezed, trying to help her lift me. I don't need... Shut up and use your legs, she snapped. She carried me upwards. I leaned all my weight against her. A former queen leaning on a fragile human girl just to cross a hallway. We shuffled into the living room. The TV was off. The room was illuminated only by the streetlights bleeding through the window blinds. She dumped me onto a worn-out fabric sofa. It smelled like cheap fabric softener and old cushions. It felt like paradise. I sank into the cushions. My entire body was throbbing. The cold was still inside my bones, but the air in the room was slowly defrosting my skin. It burned! Asti stood over me. She crossed her arms. She still had her phone clutched in one hand. "Why are you here?" she asked. "I needed a place to fall," I said honestly. The lie wasn't worth the energy anymore. "Who did this to you?" "People who want to finish the job." I forced my heavy eyes to stay open, locking onto hers. "Don't call anyone, Estrella. Don't tell anyone I'm here." "Who would I call?" she asked with a bitter edge to her voice. "The hospital, the police? I don't even know what you are anymore." "Just promise me," I whispered. The darkness was pulling at the edges of my vision. It was heavy and absolute. I tried to sound dangerous. I tried to sound like the monster I used to be. "If you tell them, I'll rip your throat out." It was a terrible threat. I didn't even have fangs to do it with. My voice was just a broken rasp. Asti looked at me. Her face was unreadable in the dim light. She didn't look scared, she just looked incredibly tired. "You can't even stand up, Martha," she said. I wanted to argue. I wanted to prove her wrong, but my eyes rolled back and the dark finally swallowed me whole.